For much of my childhood, I was in a predominantly all-white school, and it was quite common to be asked the reason for not cutting my hair. Now, typically there was one of about maybe three responses that I would give. For Sikhs, our hair is a gift from God, or it was an order of our 10th Guru not to cut our hair, or it is part of our religious identity as Khalsa to keep our gaze, our uncut hair. As I got older, I think it became more important to not just reiterate these teachings to those who asked us, as we ourselves had learned from those we questioned, but importantly to actually connect and internalize the reasons for keeping our gaze. So let's explore those three reasons I gave in just a little bit more detail. Now, what does it mean when we say our gaze are a gift from God? Throughout many traditions in the world and many ancient orders, having your gaze, having uncut hair, and in particular wearing your hair at the top of your head is a form associated with spirituality, is a form associated with nobility, and a form associated with dignity. And actually, Guru Sahib speaks of this in their Bani, for example, in Sarblo Granth, where they speak of the Khalsa having the roop of Munishwar, having the roop of great saintly kings. We also find in Gurbani that the Damalla, what many of us use to tie our gaze, having associations to wrestlers. We read Gurbani where Vaheguru is sometimes described as Khoob teri pagadi mithi tere bol, having a beautiful turban. So we see this association between the divine being and the turban, and we see this association between royalty and dignity and the gaze. What we also find is that for many Sikhs, having a gaze and combing a gaze first thing in the morning becomes at times your first connection to the divine. It becomes a means of remembering your Guru, it becomes a means of remembering your God, and it represents the grace of Vaheguru who's given us our life, who's given our gaze. So in this way we can understand our gaze, our uncut hair, as a blessing, as a kirpa, as a dain of God, and for us to keep it as it is a way for us to stay in the hukum of Akal Purkh, is a way for us to stay in the will of Akal Purkh, which is a key message and teaching that Guru Nanak Dev Ji gives in the Japji Sahib. Okay, so we've got the spirituality, we've got the godly angle to it. What about Guru Gobind Singh Ji then? Now, the time at which Guru Gobind Singh Ji ordained the Khalsa to have a unique identity corresponds to their ascendancy to the Guruship following the martyrdom of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji Maharaj. Now, interestingly, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji Maharaj gave their life in defense for the religious symbols of another religion, the Janeo, the sacred thread worn by the Hindus. And Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji sacrificed their life to protect that symbology and right of another religion to practice their faith freely. And when it came to claiming Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji's body, there was a lot of hesitancy, as many people did not want to step up to show some association with the Guru. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji blessed the Sikhs who did step up and respectfully ensure that Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji's last rites were performed. But Guru Gobind Singh Ji, in blessing them, also ordained that they would create such a Sikh, they would create such a Khalsa who would stick out amongst millions. And in many ways, this was a direct challenge to the ruler of the time, and is consistent with the revolution that Guru Gobind Singh Ji set about. And so it wasn't just a isolated instruction for the Sikhs to keep their gaze. It was part of a systemic, it was part of a number of measures that the Guru introduced in a direct challenge to Aurangzeb. Now, Aurangzeb had banned music, and Guru Gobind Singh Ji commissioned Sangeet. Guru Gobind Singh Ji themselves performed Sangeet. Aurangzeb had banned the bearing of weapons and horse ridings for non-Muslims. Guru Gobind Singh Ji said that if you're coming to me, come with your weapons, and Aurangzeb had banned the wearing of turban banned the wearing of turbans for non-Muslims as well. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji then gave that famous order at the time, which was Bina Shastra ke Sang na devo dedidari, that if you're to come to me, come with your case, come bearing your arms, and show the Guru that you are one of the Gurus, and that you are not essentially living in fear of the Emperor's rule. And the Guru's message then about keeping case and keeping true with the traditions of royalty, nobility, and dignity also shows a sovereignty that comes with keeping case, a sovereignty that any given ruler of the time cannot challenge, and it gives Sikhs and it gives the Khalsa a real sense of individual spirit, a real sense of community spirit. And this then comes together in what I always saw as the third reason for why we keep our case, which is it is part of the Khalsa identity, it is part of our religious identity. Now, whether we get into the debate, is Sikhi a religion, is Sikhi a dharam, is Sikhi a spiritual practice, regardless of those, what we know in our history, that those who have looked like us have been persecuted throughout history for looking like this. And we see this during the 1700s, during the Holocaust that took place at the time there, where rewards would be given for capturing any Sikhs with their case, where anyone with their case would be hunted down. And essentially many people in fear for their lives from Punjab actually left Punjab, tried to live in the jungles or in parts of Rajasthan, Bikaner, or other parts in India. And for me, having my case binds me to a community consciousness. It binds me to a history, and it makes me feel part of that community, which for hundreds of years has lived by the message of the Guru, has fought to preserve the teachings of the Guru, has fought to preserve their identity, and regardless of what persecution it has faced, has continued to serve humanity in many ways. And in the case being tied to the spirit of Sikhi, in the case being tied to the spirit of the Khalsa in that way, it becomes clear why many have sought to attack the case of Sikhs as a means of attacking that very spirit. So we spoke of in the 1700s, for example, the hunting down of Kesdari Sikhs. In the 1800s, in the first half of the century, where the Khalsa enjoyed its own rule in Punjab and over large parts of northern India, the Khalsa identity flourished during those times, as did religious pluralism, religious tolerism, and many other values that Gurbani promoted. But with the loss of that Raj, we also saw subtle and sometimes more evident attacks against that Sikh identity. So whether this took place in the form of missionary preaching against Sikhi, essentially teaching Sikhs that the Christianity is the true way, that Guru Nanak Dev Ji in fact came to profess Christianity, and the intended direction there was then to get Sikhs to cut their case, was to get Sikhs to shun the identity that bound them to their gurus. And many of us that now live even in the West, many of the Gurdwara that we go to are Singh Sabha Gurdwara. The very first Singh Sabhas essentially came together at a time where a number of Sikh Naujawan in Punjab publicly cut their case for the first time. And this was this was a real sort of seen as a challenge to the diminishing presence of the Khalsa within Punjab. And to cut one's hair in India for quite a while had also been a sign of shame. It had also been a sign of someone being a kind of outcast or having done something wrong. And it sort of flies in the face of the idea of case representing dignity. For example, as we know, widows would have their head shaven off. Sometimes people of certain character would have their head shaved off. And this was done to essentially disrespect them and make them feel lowly, make them feel oppressed. And our case are the opposite of that. Our case are the opposite of that. And our case are for us a way in which living our life on a day-to-day basis, we can connect with Waheguru, we can connect with their hukum, we can feel their grace and their kirpa, we can follow the teachings of our Guru, and we can be part of that collective conscious of the Khalsa and its history, and be the living embodiment of its ideals and values in today's world.